Until late 2020, Nick Clark was a bike shop owner, coaching a women's cycling team in the Washington, D.C. suburbs. And with his charismatic personality, he was very popular in the neighborhood and across the biking community in general. That was until a journalist at Cycling Tips exposed him, opening the doors for a formal investigation. Stay tuned because in this video, we're talking all about why he was suspended from USA Cycling. First up, Nick Clark is suspended from USA Cycling. Complaints have been popping up against Nick for over 3 years because of his shady past. For many years, Clark has claimed that he was a professional cyclist with many titles to his name, including an Australian time trial championship, along with a junior men's world championship medal. He said that he's raced for major teams including AG2R Casino, taking part in events in riding events, including the Tour of Flanders. But as revealed through a major expose piece on Cycling Tips, all of this was a lie. In the wake of the story, USA Cycling opened up an investigation against him and found that he'd violated their code of conduct through his act of fraud, deception, or dishonesty. Yeah, make that multiple acts of deception. This guy fabricated his entire background to get to where he was in the world of cycling. So, what were the consequences? He was suspended from the organization for a year, which meant that he couldn't take part in USA Cycling activities in any capacity. Additionally, USA Cycling suspended Clark's coaching license for 3 years. Next up, Nick's rise in the biking community. We know what you're wondering. How did this guy even get so far with all his lies? It's no surprise that all of it was one big accident. He moved to South Carolina to work in 2013, and then quit his job in 2017 to open up a bike shop. Under his leadership, the ProBike FC blossomed to become a hotspot in the cycling scene. And of course, along with that, Nick's reputation grew as well. It wasn't long before he started growing his empire. His business grew, expanding to second premises on the same strip of shops. Maybe the biggest asset Nick cashed in on was word of mouth. A network of shop ambassadors and racing team members proudly flew the flag of ProBike FC, and right there at the center of it all was the charismatic Nick Clark, an Australian with a tragic past and supposedly colorful racing history. Initially, Nick played down his achievements from his pro cycling days. Soon enough, in his now deleted Strava account, his bio described him as a retired pro cyclist. He quickly started getting too comfortable, though, and would make up creative stories about serving in the military and being a war hero. Everyone gobbled it up, though. Moving on, Nick starts coaching. Clark soon started claiming that he'd been headhunted by Lance Armstrong's man, George Hincapie, who wanted him to set up a women's version of the Hincapie Holowesko squad. Clark went around claiming that he'd martyred his own career to get the team off the ground, but eventually the project came to a close due to a lack of funding. Well, all of this appears to be completely fabricated because Cycling Tips investigative journalist could find no record of such a team ever existing or ever even being planned. It didn't matter to Nick though. He had now added cycling coach to his resume, and it wasn't long before he was bragging about managing teams and dealing with rider contracts and sponsorship negotiations, things he'd never done before. On the back of this alleged management and cycling experience, Clark established and coached his own women's cycling team. Let's talk about the start of the end. Strava, the sports social network, allows you to get a KOM or King of the Mountain if you make the fastest time on a ride. And it seems Nick had many KOMs under his belt, but something just wasn't adding up here. In the Lee Mill climb segment of the ride, the road rises from difficult Run River and goes uphill for around half a mile. When Clark logged his rise to Strava at the end of that day, something was off. His speed up the climb was apparently 33 miles per hour on a climb which peaked at an 8.5% incline. It just didn't make sense. It either had to be insanely muscular legs or a digital glitch. That's where suspicion started harboring against Nick though. People started digging, and this is where Nick's downfall began. Next, the lies start coming in. Nick had told everyone that he was from Perth, Western Australia. He had proudly told anyone who'd listened that in 1993, Nick had chanced his way into the Junior Road World Championships, securing 3rd place. And everyone believed him because the guy had a medal to prove it. Just a few simple Google searches revealed the lies though. Junior Worlds that year wasn't even held in Oslo, where Nick claimed to have raced. In fact, the race took place in Clark's own city, Perth. Despite actually being from the city, Clark's name is nowhere to be found on the list of finishers because there's no evidence he ever started the race. In fact, the 3rd place finisher was an Italian, Michele Razzani. Moving on, disowned by his countrymen. The Australian cyclist community in Europe is pretty close-knit, so everyone was shocked when the Olympic gold medalist Scott McGrory said that he'd never heard of Nick Clark. It really did sound strange when the Australian professional cycling diaspora of the 90s said that he knows absolutely nothing about Nick. His story was always met with confusion, denial, and just a little bemusement. But like clockwork, Cycling Tips revealed that Nick had never even raced in any of the events he claimed to race in, and he had never been part of any teams that he had on his resume. This guy was as shady as they come. The slip-up. Soon enough, Nick started getting too comfortable, and the lies just became too stretched. Clark was boasting about receiving an invitation to the famed monument event, which is arguably cycling's most prestigious one-day race. He claimed he got in because he had a good relationship with the Italian Pro Continental team called Lipomo Pro Cycling. But what's crazy is that there's no evidence of Lipomo Pro Cycling ever existing. Nick had all these Lipomo kits which had the UCI Europe Tour logo on them, but if you Google the team, there's practically no evidence of its existence. One girl from Nick's cycling team said that this was really shady. Everyone knows that a cycling team needs to have social media because that's how they get sponsors. And that's when she knew Nick was a total scam artist. Soon enough, it was revealed that the kit had been manufactured by Giordana, who claimed that it was a custom order they did for ProBike FC. Yikes. Finally, Nick gets caught. In August 2022, Nick called a meeting at the shop in light of the allegations against him. Close friends, employees, and members of the women's cycling team were there. One woman who was there described that Clark broke down in tears, saying he'd been stripped. He apologized for what he'd done and said he really regretted it, although he was careful to stop short of full admission. People just weren't buying it anymore, and they knew he was only sorry that he got caught. Even at that moment, he was calling his downfall a witch hunt and blamed Australian keyboard warriors. He withdrew from the community at Falls Church, and it wasn't long before he sold his shop. Before we end, it turns out Nick was leading many lives. First up, his many fake degrees. As it turns out, Nick's fabricated cycling career was just the tip of the iceberg. He had also previously claimed to be a lawyer, a banker, a business owner, and also part of the military. He also said that he had ties with many political and military elites, with ton of fake degrees and accreditations. Many people became suspicious when he claimed he had been a lawyer at a prestigious law firm, as well as an acquisition attorney at Lehman Brothers. And the final straw came when Clark's old riding buddy said that it was clear he had just been acting all along. In fact, his demeanor in his corporate life was so different from the hyper-masculine persona he adopted at his bike shop. Nick said that he'd simply bolstered his resume because he was having difficulty finding a job. Next up, he was also the CEO of an Australian company. In fact, the reason Nick moved to the US in 2013 was to become CEO at an Australian Securities Exchange listed chemicals company which had its operations based in South Carolina. He was also the CEO of Alexium International from 2013 to 2017, after which he resigned to open up his bike shop. He had gotten the role of CEO due to his experience in prestigious positions elsewhere in the business world, and particularly in the mining sector. But of course, we just don't know how much of this really is true. Finally, he may have taken on a new role. Clark is now working as a firearms director at a gun shop. He claims he has military experience and professional background as a former officer of the Department of Corrections, which is what led him to this career path. In Nick's own words, he's NRA certified as a pistol, rifle, and shotgun instructor. Depending on who's asking, his story keeps shifting, but we're most certain that his new persona he's created is also one of his intricately woven web of lies. And that's a wrap for this video. Do you think Nick's new career is legit? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this.